In the quiet town of Howard, Ohio, nestled among rusting leaves and sleepy streets, a horror unfolded that no one could have ever imagined. It started with a simple welfare check and ended with the discovery of a nightmare hidden in a plain sight. A mother, her 2 children, and her best friend vanished without a trace. Their home eerily silent but soaked in blood. What followed was a manhunt that led authorities to a most chilling discovery. A man who lived among trees. Let's dive right into it. It was Wednesday, 10th of November 2010, and in a small town of Howard, Ohio, a 32-year-old Linda Herman was going through some ads for flats to rent. Tina, who was a single mother of 2, moved to Howard to give her kids a safer environment to grow up in, and it seemed that she could not have picked a better place. Howard was not a big place, and so it felt much safer than a huge busy city. Everyone was really big on creating a supportive community, and so it was very common for people to know the majority of the people around. It was one of those places where wherever you went, you were bound to bump into someone you knew. And Tina really liked all of that. Her 2 kids, 11-year-old Cody and 13-year-old Sarah, were both attending the local school and so seemed to really enjoy living there. They both had lots of friends and were thriving within the small community. But even though the family of 3 were really enjoying their quiet life in their current house of 481 King Beach Drive in Apple Valley, Tina wanted to move, and recently she started looking around more seriously. This was mainly because she and her kids also shared the house with Tina's boyfriend, a man named Greg. And Tina wanted to break up and start afresh. And so Tina's friend and neighbor, 41-year-old Stephanie Sprang, was currently helping her. The 2 women actually arranged to meet up that day because they were going to view a flat together and then later on catch up over a cup of coffee and see what they really thought about the place. A knock on the door interrupted Tina. And when she went to answer it, there was Stephanie, smiling and asking if Tina was ready to go. Tina smiled back and said, "Yep, I'm just gonna grab my purse and my coat and let's go." And in just a few minutes, the 2 women were driving off in Tina's car. Later that day, Sarah and Cody were returning home from school. When Sarah opened the door and started removing her shoes, she noticed that there was something sticky underneath her feet. She frowned and turned her shoe over, thinking it must have been a chewing gum that got stuck on her shoes on the way home. But when she did that, Sarah just froze. Her soul was red. And Sarah looked around and saw that there were droplets of the same red liquid all over the floor. She quickly looked at Cody, who was still standing in the doorway, but she noticed that Cody was not looking at her. Instead, he was looking at something behind her. At around 7 p.m. on Thursday, 11th of November, Tina's manager at the local Dairy Queen, where the mother of 2 worked for years, phoned the police. Valerie Haythorne, who knew Tina very well, decided to report this because Tina was scheduled to start her shift at 4 p.m., but she actually never came by the Dairy Queen. And Valerie thought that this was very off. Tina had never been late, so not appearing for the whole 3 hours without even calling in was extremely strange. Valerie had asked the police to go and do a welfare check on Tina, and so the 2 officers were dispatched and came by the house the same day at around 7:30 p.m. But when they knocked on the door, they did not get an answer. They tried again, but still nobody came to the door, and with all the lights being off, the police just assumed that nobody was home and simply left. Little did they know that they were only a few hours away from receiving yet another call. The following day, Tina's manager Valerie was feeling extremely anxious and worried. The police never found Tina the day before, and according to them, the house just looked as if they left. But none of this was really making any sense to Valerie, and so she decided to go over to Tina's house herself. On the way over there, she also tried calling Tina's emergency contact number, which was Stephanie's, but the woman was also not answering her phone. All of this was making Valerie very uncomfortable, because the situation just felt very off. When Valerie got to the house, she parked right in front of it and went straight for the front door. She knocked, rang the bell, and even shouted Tina's name to come and open the door. But just like the officers the day earlier, she also found absolutely no trace of anyone being there. And so Valerie did the only thing she could think of. She tried opening the door, and to her surprise, it was unlocked. So Valerie took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway. And immediately she knew that something horrible must have happened in there. There was blood everywhere. There were bloody shoe prints and drag marks all over the floor, as if a vicious struggle took place there. Valerie did not need another reason to call the police, and so she dialed 911. She informed the officer that she had gone in to check on Tina, and when she entered the house, she could see blood everywhere. The officer took down the notes and told her to not go back inside. 2 police officers were immediately dispatched into Tina's house, and upon entering, they were truly horrified with what they found inside there. Just like Valerie, they could see blood spatter and footprints everywhere around the house. There were grocery bags left scattered around the kitchen as if they were just dropped there when they were brought in. There was blood all over the bathroom and the bathtub, as if something horrific took place in there. The officers also found multiple marks left by a bottle of motor oil that was also sitting on the floor, now empty. This led them to believe that whoever did this must have thought about burning the house down to cover their trucks up, as DNA and other evidence was practically all over the place. Apart from this, the officers were also able to lift an incredibly detailed shoe print. This was a small woman's size of a very popular brand Airwalk, and so everyone thought that it must have belonged to the teenage girl Sarah. This led everyone to believe that the girl must have been actually kidnapped, and so they all prayed that the girl was still alive. This, of course, put even more pressure on the investigators, because the first 72 hours are always the most crucial. If the math was correct, the kidnapping would have likely happened on Wednesday the 10th, when Tina was reporting for not turning up at work. Sarah and Cody did not attend school on the Thursday 11th, so that would also confirm that they were all likely kidnapped the day before. So this was not leaving the investigators with much time to spare. All they could hope for was to work as fast as they could and pray that the family was being held somewhere alive. A search for Sarah, Cody and Tina was divided into 3 teams. The first team would stay at the station and start conducting interviews with friends and family. The second group would immediately start a wide search and comb through the area, mountains, forests and rivers. And the last group would kept investigating the house to see if they could gather any more clues or evidence. In cases like these, the police would almost always zone in on the romantic partners, and so both Tina's ex-husband Larry and Tina's current boyfriend Greg were brought in. Larry seemed totally overwhelmed with emotion that his children and ex-wife were missing, and kept saying that he had this feeling that something was just wrong with his children. Greg, on the other hand, admitted that he and Tina had an argument the morning of when the family went missing. Tina was suspecting that Greg was cheating on her, and this is really what helped Tina make up her mind about moving out. Greg assured the officers that he still loved her, even though they were not on the best of terms right now. And even though the situation was looking very suspicious to the officers, they had nothing on Greg to hold them in. They also checked both men's alibi, and because they checked out, for now they had to start looking elsewhere. They continued to interview Tina's friends, but again, nothing seemed to bring any more information as to what would have happened that Wednesday. At the same time, on the other side of the town, the police were investigating the house. The officers quickly found out that Tina's Ford pickup truck was missing. And this was a really chilling detail, as they immediately thought that the family could have been moved in it. They also discovered a car outside of the property that did not belong to anyone in the family. But they would soon discover that it was actually of Stephanie Sprang, the other woman who was also reported to be missing. They would later find out that one of the blood samples that they had collected from the crime scene also belonged to Stephanie. Amongst other evidence, the investigators uncovered a Walmart bag which contained a tarp, heavy-duty trash bags, and a receipt from a Walmart located town over. And this is exactly what helped the investigators to break the case wide open. The receipt was used to track down the purchases, and then match the time and the till where the purchase was made to the surveillance footage. And soon enough, the police found themselves the first lead. A very unassuming looking man, who at first looked like a complete stranger. He calmly paid for his items and then carried them over to his car and drove away in his ordinary Toyota Yaris. So the next step was to search the database for all the Toyota Yaris owners. But when they did that, the investigators found something that stood out to them immediately. At the end of the second page was one name that when they cross-checked his driver's license, his mother's address was just a street over from when Tina's house was. This meant that potentially this man could have just walked over to Tina's house, which would also explain why her truck was missing. The man had no need to use his own car. The most sensational finding was when the investigators compared this man's driver's license image to the one from the surveillance camera. And not only did they find a match, but the man was actually wearing the same shirt in both images. And so this man, aka Matthew Hoffman, quickly became the #1 suspect. Hoffman, who was 30 years of age, lived by himself in the town over from the Apple Valley. He was an unemployed tree surgeon and apparently adored nature and hikes more than anything. On top of this, he was already known to the police because of his criminal records, such as burglary and arson. With all of this information in place, the authorities obtained a warrant and a SWAT team raided Hoffman's house on the Sunday, the 14th of November. And as soon as they entered, they made some incredibly shocking discoveries. Hoffman was lying asleep on the sofa amid piles and piles of leaves. The whole house looked as if it was just being stuffed with them. There were bags of leaves taped to the walls in the bathroom, and the rest of the house had thousands of leaves scattered around, obscuring most of the furniture from vision. The investigators even thought that the bodies could have been actually hidden underneath the leaves because there was this very strange odor throughout the house. In the kitchen, the team found 2 red popsicles and a pair of dead squirrels inside of the freezer. According to later interviews, Hoffman was often seen shooting squirrels in the neighborhood so that he could later eat them, as apparently he didn't like the groceries. But the worst was yet to come. There was a large heavy sewing cabinet propped against one of the walls, and when the officers removed it, they found it to be concealing a door to the basement. And held captive behind a crevice in the wall in the basement was the missing teenager, Sarah. She was found tied up and sitting quietly on a bed made of leaves. Everyone was stunned, but also incredibly relieved to see that she was still alive. Sarah was carefully walked out of the house and rushed into the hospital where she was stabilized. Her father, Larry, came to the hospital right away to see her and was absolutely shocked to see his daughter in such a bad state. Even though Sarah was extremely traumatized, she still managed to go through an interview with the police where she described the horrors of the past 4 days. Hoffman was immediately arrested and brought in for questioning. At first he refused to say anything, but kept repeating that he was going to kill himself. So he was placed into a cell on suicide watch. It wasn't until a female detective started interrogating him, pretending like she was on his side and caring for him, that he finally started to break down. Hoffman allegedly had a bad dream where he opened a grocery bag full of body parts, and so everything came back to him. He wanted the police to shoot him down in a faked runaway because he thought that he would be put in prison and injected with thorazine for the rest of his life. Thorazine is a drug that is used to treat psychotic disorders like schizophrenia and manic depression. But the authorities declined his request, which delayed his confession by another 2 days. And at this stage, everyone was literally beside themselves, as they really wanted to find the 3 missing people alive. They of course still had no idea what had really happened to Tina, Stephanie and Cody, but finally, after 12 hours of intense interrogation, Hoffman decided to plead guilty. He wrote down a full confession together with a location of where the police would find the missing trio, in exchange for not receiving the death penalty. In his chilling confession, Hoffman pointed at the Cocosing Nature Reserve, where a 60-foot tall hollow tree was standing. The tree had a small hole towards the top of his trunk, but that was not reachable from the ground. So a hole had to be cut much closer to the ground so that access could be gained. And when the investigators finally could have a proper look into the tree, they were left horrified and lost all hope of ever finding Tina, Cody and Stephanie alive. The 3 victims were found stuffed in heavy-duty bags with deep stab marks in their backs and chests. According to the coroner, they bled out because of their wounds. But this was far from the worst details about this case. In order for Hoffman to be able to place their bodies into the tree, he did the one thing unimaginable. He dismembered them. He then wrapped the parts up into the plastic trash bags, then hoisted them up and lowered them back into the tree that he had correctly assumed had been hollow. The preserve was only about 11 minutes drive from Tina's house, and being in a very rural settings, Hoffman most likely viewed it as the best place to hide the bodies. But I think there was another reason he chose this place in particular. You see, the preserve is also a natural burial ground. This means that corpses are put in shrouds or biodegradable caskets, and then a simple engraved stone is placed on top of the shroud, or the grave is left completely unmarked. So, with so many deceased bodies around, Hoffman likely thought that nobody would be able to find his victims there. And according to Sheriff David Barber, he was most likely right. But this was also due to the fact that the tree was very tall, and there was no indication that something might be actually in it. As part of the deal that Hoffman struck with the investigators, he demanded for the tree to be left unharmed, but that did not end up happening. It was decided to cut the tree down out of respect for the families, so that the tree would not become a sightseeing place. Tina's missing pickup truck was also found nearby the reserve, meaning Hoffman dumped it there before having the chance to return it to the house, which he had also planned on burning down. But because of the full-scale investigation, he never really got a chance to do that. Following this gruesome discovery, Hoffman also disclosed the full account of his heinous crimes. And so here is the full description of what really happened to Tina, Cody, Sarah and Stephanie the day they went missing, November 10, 2010. The day before the attacks, Hoffman was nesting in the trees right in front of the house, waiting on everyone to leave so that he could burglarize the house. But an hour after he managed to get inside, Tina and Stephanie actually came home earlier and found Hoffman in one of the bedrooms. And so, thinking quickly, Hoffman pulled out his hunting knife and attacked the two women with it. Apparently at first he just wanted to hit them hard with the butt of the knife, so they would just lose consciousness. But as it was not working, he panicked and ended up stabbing and killing them. He then realized what he had done, and so made the terrible decision of dismembering them right there in the bathtub. But Hoffman was interrupted yet again when Cody and Sarah came home from school. Sarah ran from a bedroom where she locked herself up, but Cody was killed right there in the doorway. Hoffman then went upstairs to get Sarah and managed to intervene just before she could call 911, and so he bound her hands and walked her downstairs into the kitchen where he tied her up. Hoffman then proceeded to dismember Cody, and he also killed the family dog who would not stop barking. He then wrapped up the deceased in heavy-duty plastic bags and loaded them into Tina's truck. Hoffman then went back to get Sarah, placed a pillowcase over her head so that she could not see anything, and then walked the girl into the garage, put her in the car on top of the plastic bags with her deceased family inside of them, and then simply drove off. He changed the pickup truck for his own car mid-journey, and when they finally arrived at Hoffman's house, he led Sarah down the basement and put her onto that bed made of leaves and blankets. And then he tied her hands and legs and just left her there. Most of the time, Sarah would actually be left gagged as well. And at first, that is also where he placed the deceased bodies, with Sarah guessing as to what had happened to her family, as well as where the smell was coming from. Sarah actually never saw any of the brutal attacks take place, and so she had no idea that her family was gone. She kept asking Hoffman what happened to them, but he just refused to answer her. Hoffman kept repeating that he was actually a good guy since he spared Sarah and let her even play video games, watch TV and eat hamburgers. He said that he would never hurt her as he just couldn't. But the fact that he had actually sexually assaulted her and then held her hostage was not mentioned anywhere in her notes. However, Sarah would of course give a full account of what had really happened while she was being held by Hoffman, so everyone knew that he was lying. Hoffman was charged in January 2011 with crimes including the murder of Tina, Cody and Stephanie, and also the rape and kidnapping of Sarah. He pleaded guilty to all 10 of his charges. Due to the stockpiling of leaves, he's also believed to be mentally disturbed and suffer from severe delusions. As a result of his confession and the struck deal, the prosecutors did not pursue a death sentence, and so Hoffman was sentenced to life in prison without a possibility of parole. As for Sarah, who managed to survive all of this, she was placed into the care of her father, but that sadly did not have a happy ending either. He was violent towards her, and she also became the victim of bullying by her stepmother. But Sarah decided to fight against that and actually managed to get her custodians to be served with protection papers and were ordered to have no contact with Sarah whatsoever. Sarah then wrote a book about her case and with her grandmother started the Victims Advocacy Fund. She appeared on Dr. Phil, and thanks to the TV program as well as the University of Florida, she was supported to go on to study pediatrics. Sarah is now raising her own family, but from her own posts, it is pretty clear that she's still suffering, which is completely understandable. She has been incredibly strong during all of this, but that still does not erase the fact that her mother and brother were viciously killed and she herself was assaulted multiple times and held under such inhumane conditions. It is a miracle that she's still managing to live a normal life. I do wish only happiness for her and hope that she and her new family can now have a much happier life. Now, as always, please let me know your thoughts on this case. I do wish that the death penalty would be more of a thing in many cases, but then again, some say that life in prison can be worse than death itself. I certainly hope that this is the case for Hoffman. Until next time.